All right, today we're diving into the very last book of the Old Testament. And think about that for a second. This is the final prophetic word spoken to Israel right before God goes silent for 400 years.
That's right, 400 years. It's a period sometimes called the intertestamental period, a time when, after one last, really powerful message, the heavens just went quiet.
So, the big question is, right, who was that last voice to speak before the silence fell? Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the whole story, the message, the mystery, everything behind the prophet Malachi.
Okay, so to really get what Malachi is saying, you've got to understand the world he was living in. So let's pinpoint his exact moment in history. So, picture this. We're in the 5th century BC. It's the Persian period. The Jewish people have been back from exile in Babylon for a while now, maybe a generation or so. They even rebuilt the Second Temple, which was a huge deal. But that initial excitement, it's kind of fizzled out. A deep spiritual rot has started to set in, and that's the world Malachi steps into with this heavy message. Yeah, he's the last of what we call the 12 minor prophets, making his book the final word of the Old Testament. People even call him the seal of the prophets. But here's where it gets really fascinating. This final voice, well, it might not even have a name.
And that brings us to one of the biggest curiosities about this book, something scholars actually still debate today.
You see, the name Malachi isn't quite like Isaiah or Jeremiah. In Hebrew, Malachi literally means my messenger. So some scholars think, maybe this book was originally anonymous. The word Malachi might not be a personal name at all, but just a title, a description of the author's job. He's God's messenger.
And hey, just to clear something up real quick, because this gets confusing. The prophet Malachi we're talking about, the Old Testament guy from the 5th century BC, is completely, totally different from Saint Malachy of Armagh. That was an Irish bishop who lived over 1,500 years later. Two very different people.
So, let's get into the heart of it. What was going so wrong in Jerusalem that it required such a blunt, final message from God?
Honestly, the people were just tired. That initial fire they had when they came back from exile had completely burned out. It had turned into this widespread spiritual exhaustion. Religion wasn't about a real relationship with God anymore. It was just a hollow, boring routine. They were just going through the motions.
And Malachi's message confronts this head-on. I mean, he doesn't pull any punches. He calls out the priests for their corrupt, lazy sacrifices. He points to social injustice everywhere. He talks about how men were divorcing their wives to marry foreign women. The people were skeptical of God, and they were even holding back their tithes and offerings from the temple. He saw a society that was just falling apart at the seams.
And the way the book is written is just as powerful as the message itself. This isn't some long, boring monologue. No, it's structured like a series of 6 dramatic confrontations. You could almost call it a divine courtroom drama.
It kicks off with God making this direct, sharp accusation against the priests. He just lays it out there. You despise my name.
And this is where you really see the core of the problem. The priests, the leaders, they're so spiritually blind they can't even see what they're doing wrong. Their reaction isn't, "Oh no, what have we done?" It's to argue back. They literally ask, "How? How have we despised your name?"
God's rebuttal is just devastatingly simple. He calls out their hypocrisy. He says, "You're offering me blind, lame, and sick animals for sacrifice. Seriously? Would you try to give that to your governor? Would he be impressed?" They're giving God the leftovers, the stuff that costs them absolutely nothing.
And this pattern, this kind of divine bada and responsa, a quick back and forth argument, it happens 9 times in the book. It's this incredible literary style that just perfectly reveals how deep the disconnect was. Here are people arguing with the very God who loved them.
Okay, so here's the really crucial point. The book of Malachi isn't just an ending. It's not a period at the end of the sentence. It's more like a dramatic cliffhanger, setting the stage for everything that comes next. See, Malachi announces that a messenger is going to come, someone in the spirit of the prophet Elijah, to prepare the way for the Lord. And then, 400 years of prophetic silence. Nothing. The very next prophetic voice you hear when you open the New Testament, it's John the Baptist. And the Gospels are very clear. They identify him as the messenger Malachi was talking about. It's like Malachi built a bridge that spans all 4 centuries of silence. And that makes the final word of his book just so stunning. Think about it. The entire Old Testament, all that law, history, and prophecy ends with the threat of a curse. But it's not the final word of the story. The New Testament picks up right where it left off, and its very last word is the offer of grace.
What a contrast!
So even beyond matters of faith, Malachi's message against just going through the motions, against these hollow rituals, really makes you think, doesn't it? It's this timeless challenge to look past our own routines and ask a pretty tough question. What's the real substance, the real sincerity behind the things we say we're committed to?